Number 1. The town with 4 people and no reason to exist. Somewhere in the middle of the Australian Nullarbor Plain, between Adelaide and Perth, there is a place so forgotten that even Google Maps seems embarrassed to show it. Its name is Cook. Population 4. Not 4,000, not 400. 4 human beings living in a cluster of abandoned buildings on the longest straight stretch of railway track on planet Earth. No shops, no hospital, no school, no pub, no mobile phone signal. The nearest proper town is over 700 kilometers away in either direction. And yet, twice a week, a train stops here. The Indian Pacific, one of the world's great transcontinental railways, pulls into Cook Station. The doors open, and passengers step out into what feels like the surface of Mars. Red dust, flat horizon in every direction, silence so thick you can hear your own heartbeat. Cook exists for one reason. The train needs water. That is the entire economic justification for this settlement. Without the railway, Cook would not exist. Without Cook, the railway would need to find water somewhere else in this 1,300-kilometer desert crossing. But here is what makes Cook fascinating. People actually choose to live here. 4 people wake up every morning, look out at an endless expanse of nothing, and decide to stay another day. They are not trapped. They could leave tomorrow, but they do not. If you are watching this and wondering what kind of life is possible in a town smaller than most elevator rides, hit subscribe right now, because what I am about to show you will completely change how you think about cost of living, solitude, and what it actually means to need less. Now let me take you inside the loneliest address in Australia. Number 2. How Cook ended up on the map in the first place. The story of Cook begins in 1917, when the Trans-Australian Railway was completed, linking Port Augusta in South Australia to Kalgoorlie in Western Australia. This was one of the most ambitious engineering projects in Australian history. Connect the eastern and western halves of the continent by rail, crossing one of the most hostile landscapes on Earth. Before this railway, traveling from Adelaide to Perth meant either a brutal sea voyage or an overland journey that could take weeks and frequently killed those who attempted it. The continent was effectively 2 separate countries, divided by an impassable void. The Nullarbor Plain is not a desert in the way most people picture deserts. There are no towering sand dunes, no dramatic canyons. It is flat, unimaginably flat. The word Nullarbor comes from the Latin nulla arbor, meaning no trees. A limestone plateau stretching 476 kilometers without a single curve in the railway line. The longest straight stretch of railway anywhere in the world. To build this railway, Cook was one of them. Named after Joseph Cook, the 6th Prime Minister of Australia, this settlement was never meant to be a town. It was meant to be a fuel stop. In its peak years during the 1960s and 70s, Cook had a population of around 40 people. There was a school, a swimming pool, a small hospital, and housing for railway workers. Children grew up here. Families celebrated birthdays. For a few decades, Cook was a functioning community in the absolute middle of nowhere. Then, diesel locomotives replaced steam. Suddenly, trains did not need water every few hundred kilometers. The primary reason for Cook's existence evaporated overnight. One by one, families left. The school closed in 1997. The hospital shut down. The swimming pool was drained and never refilled. By 2010, the population had dropped to 4, and there it has stayed ever since. Number 3. What the 4 residents of Cook actually do all day. This is the question everyone asks. What do you do in a town of 4 people with no internet, no entertainment, and no neighbors for 700 kilometers? The remaining residents are railway workers. Their job is to maintain the track infrastructure, monitor communications equipment, and ensure that when the Indian Pacific rolls through twice a week, everything functions correctly. They check signals, inspect rail joints, and keep the basic infrastructure from being swallowed by the desert. The desert is relentless. Red dust finds its way into every mechanism, every seal, every electrical contact. Without constant human attention, the equipment would degrade within months. Wake up early, before the heat becomes unbearable. Summer temperatures regularly exceed 45 degrees Celsius. The air is so dry that sweat evaporates before you feel it. Mornings are for outdoor work, checking equipment, minor repairs, clearing red dust from solar panels. By midday, you retreat indoors. The afternoon is for paperwork, radio communication, and rest. Evenings are for cooking, reading, talking to the other 3 humans within walking distance, and watching sunsets that paint the sky in shades of orange and purple that seem deliberately excessive. Supplies arrive by train or by a fortnightly delivery truck. Fresh food is a luxury, planned weeks in advance. Most meals come from canned goods, dried provisions, and frozen meat. Water is pumped from underground bores and stored in massive tanks. Every liter is precious. Entertainment is self-generated. Books, radio, the occasional satellite phone call to family. Some residents have reported that after the first few months, the silence stops being oppressive and starts being addictive. Number 4. The Indian Pacific and why passengers lose their minds at Cook. Twice a week, the Indian Pacific arrives. This is one of the world's legendary rail journeys, a 4,352-kilometer crossing from Sydney to Perth that takes 65 hours and costs upward of $2,000 for a private cabin. The passengers are tourists, retirees, and rail enthusiasts from around the world. They have been sitting in air-conditioned comfort, watching the landscape transform from green farmland to red desert, and then the train stops. The doors open, and they step out into Cook. The effect is almost comical. Hundreds of well-dressed travelers suddenly standing in the middle of absolute nowhere, taking photos of abandoned buildings, reading hand-painted signs, and experiencing a kind of existential vertigo that no theme park can replicate. The stop lasts approximately 30 minutes. Passengers wander through the ghost town, peer through windows of the abandoned hospital, and buy postcards from a tiny, unstaffed shop that operates on the honor system. You take a postcard, you leave some coins, nobody checks. Some passengers describe the Cook stop as the most powerful moment of their entire journey. Not because anything happens, but because nothing happens. The silence, the scale, the absolute emptiness forces a confrontation with something most modern humans never face: the feeling of being genuinely, completely alone. Number 5. The cost of living in a town that does not technically have an economy. Here is where Cook becomes genuinely interesting for anyone thinking about alternative living or escaping the cost of living crisis, crushing people in Sydney and Melbourne. Cook has no shops, no cafes, no petrol station, no rent market, no real estate agent, no food delivery apps. The concept of consumer spending does not exist here. There is no impulse buying because there is nothing to buy. There is no keeping up with neighbors because your neighbors own exactly the same things you do. The entire competitive consumption engine that drives modern urban life has no fuel out here. The residents are employed by the railway. Accommodation is provided as part of employment. Housing is free. Utilities are covered by infrastructure that powers the railway operations. Food is supplied through regular deliveries, factored into the operational budget. If you looked purely at living expenses in Cook, the number approaches zero. There is literally nothing to spend money on. No temptation, no advertising, no shops within 700 kilometers trying to sell you something you do not need. Now, obviously, you cannot simply move to Cook. The positions are specific and limited. But the principle is instructive. How much of what we spend is actually necessary? How much is just proximity to options? Cook answers that question with brutal honesty. The cost of living stripped to genuine survival needs, is almost nothing. Shelter, water, food, and something to do. Everything else is optional. Number 6. The ghost buildings that tell Cook's real story. Walking through Cook today feels like walking through a post-apocalyptic film set. Buildings stand intact, but empty. Windows stare blankly at the desert. Paint peels in the dry heat. The school is still there, a single classroom with tiny desks visible through dusty windows. The last lesson was taught in 1997. The chalkboard still has writing on it. Nobody erased it. The teacher packed up, the student left, and the building simply stopped. Time did not pass inside that room. It just accumulated layer by layer, like the red dust on the windowsill. The hospital is perhaps the most haunting structure, a small medical facility built to serve the railway workers and their families. Today, it stands as a monument to a community that no longer exists. The swimming pool is a concrete rectangle in the red earth. It was once the social center of Cook. Families gathered here on scorching afternoons. Children splashed and screamed. Now, it holds dust, not water. Tumbleweeds collect in the deep end. There is a small cemetery, a handful of graves marking people who lived and died in this impossible place. Some date back to the early railway construction. These are people who gave their lives to connect a continent, marked by simple crosses slowly being sandblasted smooth by desert wind. Visitors often leave messages on the water tanks. Over decades, thousands of travelers have painted names, dates, and messages. It has become an unofficial tradition. Messages come from Japan, Germany, Brazil, Canada, all saying essentially the same thing. I was here, I saw the nothing, and it saw me back. Number 7. The Nullarbor itself, and why it breaks people psychologically. Cook sits in the middle of the Nullarbor Plain. And to understand Cook, you need to understand what the Nullarbor does to the human mind. The Nullarbor is approximately 200,000 square kilometers of flat limestone, roughly the size of Great Britain. No rivers, no lakes, no hills worth mentioning. The horizon is a perfect 360-degree circle around you at all times. You cannot hide from it. There is no building tall enough, no tree thick enough to break the relentless flatness pressing in from every direction. Driving across takes approximately 12 hours. Travelers routinely report highway hypnosis, where the lack of visual variety causes the brain to enter a trance state. Some have driven for hours, with no memory of the journey. Others report hallucinations, seeing lakes that do not exist, trees that vanish when approached. The brain, desperate for something to process, begins manufacturing its own content. For the residents of Cook, this landscape is not something they drive through. It is something they live inside every single day. Those who adapt report a profound shift in their relationship with silence. They describe a mental clarity impossible in populated environments. The constant noise of civilization disappears in Cook. What remains is pure quiet, and in that quiet, your own thoughts become extraordinarily loud. There is nowhere to hide from them. Number 8. The wildlife that thrives where humans cannot. While Cook struggles to maintain 4 human residents, the surrounding Nullarbor is home to wildlife, perfectly adapted to this environment. Wombats burrow beneath the limestone in complex underground networks. Southern hairy-nosed wombats dig burrows up to 200 meters long, maintaining constant temperature underground, regardless of the inferno above. A single colony can form an underground city, more populous than Cook. These animals solved the Nullarbor in a way humans never could. They went below it. Wedge-tailed eagles patrol the skies with wingspans exceeding 2 meters. From Cook, you can watch them riding thermal updrafts for hours, barely moving a feather. Their eyesight is roughly twice as sharp as human vision. They can spot a rabbit from nearly 2 kilometers away. Kangaroos move through the scrub in small mobs, most active at dawn and dusk. At night, the desert comes alive with smaller creatures. The biodiversity of the Nullarbor is far richer than its barren appearance suggests. For the residents of Cook, this wildlife is a constant companion. Kangaroos wander between abandoned buildings. Eagles nest on communication towers. Snakes, including the highly venomous western brown, are a daily hazard. You check your boots before putting them on. You look before reaching under anything. Number 9. What happens when someone gets sick in Cook? This is the question that keeps people awake when they consider remote living. What if you have a heart attack or get bitten by a snake 700 kilometers from the nearest hospital? The answer is the Royal Flying Doctor Service. Australia's aeromedical organisation, established in 1928, provides emergency care to remote areas. A fleet of aircraft can reach virtually any point in Australia within a few hours. For Cook's residents, the protocol is clear. Radio for help. An aircraft is dispatched. The Nullarbor is flat enough for landing on designated airstrips near Cook. The doctor arrives, stabilizes the patient, and evacuates them to the nearest hospital. The system works, but is not instantaneous. Response times can be several hours. Minor injuries are managed with extensive first aid kits and satellite phone consultations. Every resident has training in basic first aid. They know how to manage snake bites, fractures, and heat stroke. It is a trade-off. Freedom from urban costs and chaos, in exchange for accepting that help is hours away rather than minutes. Number 10. The longest straight stretch of railway on Earth, 478 kilometers. No curves, no bends, just perfectly straight steel rails disappearing into the horizon in both directions. You could stand on the track at Cook, look west, and the rails would converge to a single point before disappearing into the curvature of the Earth itself. The limiting factor on how far you can see is literally the shape of the planet. This stretch was not straight by accident. Engineers discovered that the Nullarbor was so geologically uniform that there was no reason to curve the track, no hills to go around, no rivers to bridge, no towns to connect. The most efficient path was a straight line, and nature offered no objection. For train drivers, this stretch presents a unique psychological challenge. Modern locomotives have alertness systems requiring drivers to regularly confirm they are conscious. Before these systems, there were incidents of drivers falling asleep. For passengers, the straight section is both mesmerizing and maddening. You sit in the lounge car, watching the landscape not change for hour after hour. Some find it peaceful, others climb the walls. It is a personality test disguised as a train journey. Number 11. The people who tried to live here and left. Not everyone who comes to Cook stays. The history of this settlement is littered with people who arrived full of romantic ideas about solitude, only to discover that extreme isolation is nothing like the fantasy. Former residents described the progression. The first week feels like a holiday. The silence is novel. The stars incredible. The second week, you notice the absence of things. No fresh bread, no random encounter with a stranger, no option to go somewhere else on a whim. By the third week, many hit what psychologists call the isolation wall. The brain, starved of social interaction, rebels. Sleep patterns shift. Small irritations with the other residents become magnified into genuine conflicts. The sound of someone chewing at dinner can feel like an assault. Those who push through often describe a breakthrough, a settling into a deeper rhythm. But many never reach that point. They request transfers. One former worker who spent 18 months at Cook described it this way: "You go out there thinking you will find yourself. What you actually find is that most of what you thought was yourself was just reactions to other people. Take those away, and you have to meet whoever is left. And not everyone likes who they find." Number 12. How Cook compares to other isolated settlements. Cook is not the only place where a handful of people live in extreme isolation. But comparing it to similar settlements reveals how unusual it is. Tristan da Cunha, in the South Atlantic, has 250 residents and is the most remote inhabited island. But it has a community, a school, a pub, social events. Cook has 4 people. McMurdo Station in Antarctica houses over 1,000 during summer, but they rotate out on contracts with end dates. Cook's residents are there indefinitely. Cook is different because it exists below the threshold of community. 4 people is not a village. It is a handful of individuals sharing a geographic location. There are no community events because there is no community in any traditional sense. This makes Cook perhaps the purest example of minimal human settlement in the developed world. The answer to how few people you need to maintain a point of human presence. Apparently, 4. Number 13. The future of Cook and whether it will survive. The question hanging over Cook is whether it will still exist in 10 years. Railway technology continues to advance. Automated monitoring systems can now do much of what human workers once did. Sensors and remote diagnostics mean fewer inspections are required. The economic argument for permanent staff weakens with every technological improvement. Climate change is making the Nullarbor more hostile. Summer temperatures trend upward. The cost of maintaining human life here continues to rise, while the justification for human presence shrinks. And yet, there are reasons Cook might persist. The Indian Pacific is a premium tourism product, trading on romance and mystique. Cook is key to that narrative. The 30-minute stop is a highlight passengers discuss for years. Removing the human element would diminish the experience. There is also emergency response. Having humans stationed along this remote stretch provides a safety net automated systems cannot replace. If a train breaks down with 200 passengers in 45-degree heat, nearby people with equipment could prevent catastrophe. Most likely, Cook will continue for another decade. A skeleton crew maintaining infrastructure, greeting trains, living in one of the strangest places anyone has called home. Number 14. What Cook teaches us about what we actually need. Strip everything away, every convenience, every luxury, every distraction. What remains? You need shelter, clean water, food, something to occupy your hands and mind. Occasional human contact, though apparently 3 other people, is sufficient. A sense of purpose. Even if that purpose is keeping railway track functional, everything else is optional. The streaming subscriptions, the restaurant meals, the new clothes, the upgraded phone, the car payments, none of it is required for survival or contentment. This is not romanticizing deprivation. The residents are paid workers with savings and the option to leave. The point is that the gap between what we need and what we spend is enormous. We confuse availability with necessity. We think we need things simply because they exist within arm's reach. Cook removes the arm's reach entirely, and what you discover is that the list of genuine needs is shockingly short. Former residents consistently report that what they genuinely missed was far less than expected. Fresh fruit, conversation with strangers, the sound of rain, a decent coffee, that was often the entire list. Everything else turned out to be noise. Number 15. The night sky above Cook and why nothing competes with it. There is one luxury in Cook that no amount of money can buy in any city. The night sky. Light pollution is so absent that the sky above Cook is among the darkest on the planet. On a clear night, which is almost every night, you see the Milky Way not as a faint smudge, but as a blazing river of light from horizon to horizon. The Magellanic Clouds hang in the southern sky like ghostly cotton. Shooting stars are not rare events. They are Tuesday. With the naked eye, you can see roughly 5,000 stars from Cook. In central Sydney, you might see 50. The difference is the difference between looking at a photograph of the ocean and standing waist-deep in it. Astronomers occasionally make pilgrimages to the Nullarbor for this sky. The combination of low humidity, zero light pollution, and atmospheric clarity creates conditions rivaling professional observatory sites. For the residents of Cook, this sky is their nightly entertainment. No television required, no streaming service competes with the actual universe, performing live above your head every night for an audience of 4. And maybe that is the final lesson of Cook. The most extraordinary experiences available to human beings, the depth of silence, the clarity of stars, the simplicity of purpose, these things are free. They have always been free. We just built so much noise around ourselves that we forgot they existed. We traded them for convenience and endless choice. And somewhere in that trade, we lost something no subscription can replace. Cook remembers 4 people, 1 railway line, and the biggest sky you will ever see. That is all. That is enough. If this changed how you think about what you need versus what you spend, hit subscribe. Next week, I am taking you somewhere equally extreme but completely different. Drop your guess in the comments. And if you made it this far, tell me honestly, could you live in Cook? I will see you in the next one.